so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I think since I'm new to the industry in general, I'm
again.
trying to learn everyone's names and everyone's
Let's see
faces and
here.
Yeah.
look at someone and
So
kind
Tad
of
is
see the
traveling.
familiarity, but I
He's
can't
on
quite
his way
place
from
it yet.
Yeah.
Cultivate.
So, you know,
That's
it's a long process.
honestly. Oh, I gotta get myself out of here.
Hey,
No, one
Tad.
second. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
There we
there we
go.
go. So, all right, third time's a charm. We're live again. This week, Tad is traveling from Ohio doing Cultivate, and he's got a whole bunch of stuff that he's really excited about that he's going to tell us about next week. But this week, you've got myself, Brandon Hudson, and Dr. Ben Higgins, both from KiS Organics. So we appreciate you guys being here very much. I just got done doing something really fun. I live on a little island, and there's a state park on the island that I hike a couple times a week, if at all possible. And so I volunteered to start doing some watering shifts out there for a revegetation program that they're doing with one of the campgrounds. So that was really fun, and it's absolutely stunning. I know it's kind of hot down where Ben is, but up here it's 70 and Ferris Bueller skies, just unreal. Ben, what's up with you?
88.5. I got 88.5 at my little weather station. It's supposed to get up to 90 by the end of the day. That's one of the things. I grew up in SoCal, so for me, the hottest time of the day was noon to 1. But moving up here, it's super weird because it's not like hot. The peak heat of the day isn't until like what, 4, 5, sometimes 6.
Yeah,
it trips me out.
Yeah, we have long here. Yeah, because it was always 3. Like the greenhouse rules, don't water after 3 because it's going to start cooling off. And here, you know, I could easily go water at 3 o'clock. You know, they'd love it.
Yeah.
Looks like we got some folks showing up. Thank you guys for being here. Garage Grower. We got a 10-gallon rib soil fabric pot. I'm not sure what that means. Should you bottom water? How often? I prefer to top water for a bunch of different reasons. You know, I don't like stratification of fertility, and top watering helps break that down. It also, you know, opens up pores, and, you know, as the water percolates down into the soil, it pulls oxygen with it. So I prefer to top water. You know, if you're using a sip or you got to go out of town or something like that, then maybe set up some bottom watering. Ben, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just trying to Google what the rib soil fabric pot. I'm not familiar with those either.
It might be a mistype.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it was living soil fabric pot. Brandon, so I'm not too hip to bottom watering.
Okay.
Is that kind of just like you sit it on water and let the
there's a bunch of different designs. Bottom watering, you know, like we used to do bottom watering when we would set up guerrilla grows in South Carolina on the islands, allegedly. We would take 50 garbage cans, put a cement brick and, you know, a cinder block bottom one, put a bunch of water in it, and put nylon rope down as wicks. And so it would use that water, and that way we wouldn't have to go back out there for, you know, weeks at a time, you know. So we would go out in like little fishing or oyster boats, look like we're something legit, drop somebody on the island with a bunch of water, and they'd re-up those. And so bottom watering is a great way for, you know, sips work kind of the same way. It's just capillary action. There's contact with the bottom, you know, and a lot of times roots will grow down into it. You know, I prefer to have some oxygen in there. You know, I know a lot of folks don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the thing for me it's my life by nature is experimenting with things. But when it comes to like natural systems, like maybe it's me, but like intuitively, I think plants are kind of used to water coming from the top, not the bottom. Whether or not that really means or translates to anything, I know we can get fun with like crop steering and that kind of stuff. But my gut, without again knowing too much about it, thinks that plants evolved over hundreds of millions of years to deal with watering percolating from the top down, not bottom up. So I don't know. That's just a very rough
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
take on it.
I'm very much pro top water. I
Yeah,
see a position for bottom watering,
sure.
you know, tips and that kind of stuff. The number of folks I talk to, you know, on a weekly basis who call up and they say, "Hey man, I travel, I'm home 1-2 days a week. How do I do this?" And a sip, you know, or, you know, you don't want to risk a blue mat,
Yeah,
runaway blue mat while you're in Phoenix and you live in, you know, wherever, Chicago.
happened to me.
So,
My garage flooded. It was really fun.
yeah, yeah. So, Donald's saying he likes the auto pot setup. Auto pots, they're all bottom water and it works, you know.
Yeah,
Um, and I do apologize. I'm seeing Fried Piper and Donald Roberts saying, yeah, that the chat is hard to read in this format. I apologize, guys. We're trying to do the best we can today with Tad being on the road and jumping on a plane here in a second. So hopefully you guys will bear with us here today. So rusty nails, auto pots, or anything automation in the home grow environment just takes away from the gardening for me. Yeah, it really comes. That's a great point because like it comes down to personal preference. Like I just went and did a bunch of watering in a state park, volunteering, and I loved it. I love every second of it. I'm out and just, I'm looking out at the sound. So it's the best office you'll ever have. It's absolutely stunning. Looking out at the Puget Sound with islands all around and eagles, and it's pretty ridiculous. And I'm watering plants, and I really enjoy that activity. There's some people that find it really tedious and hate to do it, and so maybe that's a solution for those folks. Anything can
yeah,
get monotonous and tedious. Trimming's probably the first one for everybody, but watering can get tedious for folks. But I feel like watering's such a fine art that, I've been growing cannabis for 40 years. I still am learning about watering.
yeah, and it's a really good point. They've done studies on the effects of gardening on the human brain. There's definitely there's a relationship there. So, not to say that obviously once you start hating your life because you're on your 700th 1 gallon pot, then yeah, maybe it's not doing you a whole lot of good at that point. But, I think there is a little bit to the plants and that whole process giving back to you.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's keep moving on here. Hash Phantom seems like Tad's busy every week at this time. Yeah, we try to stay the same day, same bat channel, same bat time, just because that makes it easier for folks to remember. And, we try to be pretty consistent. We've got a revolving group of myself, Ben, Tad, and Chad. And so hopefully we can continue to answer questions and provide some value for folks spending their afternoon with us. We really appreciate you guys checking in. Little Nugs, good to see you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Eagle has landed. Always love beans. So good man. What else we got here?
Hey guys,
Yeah. Oh, here's Tad.
There's
You
Tad.
back.
if it's not too loud and doesn't get crazy, I'm at the airport. I thought I would join in. I missed the first part, so I don't even know what you're talking about. Uh, but happy to talk a little bit about Cultivate. If we need something, or if there's questions, feel free to continue on.
Yeah, yeah. We just have a question from Little Nugs. What's one way to free up my blue mat hose? It's new, but one line seems to be closed.
Little Nugs, if you can let me know, are you talking the main supply line, the drip tape, the line that goes through the sensor, or the carrot? Which one of those are you? Which one of those you chatting about? I'll throw that question back at you, and if I see a response, I'll tackle that.
Resonant Media, sips are great. You love helping me out. No, man, I do. I've done deep water culture. I've done ebb and flow. I've done coliseums. I've done all kinds of guerrilla grows. I've grown in trees tied up, there's I've grown plants in a tennis shoe nailed to a post just because it's fun. And so, yeah, if you can grow cannabis in it, I'm down to do it. So yeah, it's all good. I love it all. Man, Fried Piper, thank you. That's why we're here. We appreciate it, man. We appreciate you guys. So it's
Okay, so
drip
it's drip
tape.
tape. All right, perfect. So yeah, I mean, depending on how old, you said it was brand new, so that shouldn't be happening. Now, a common, not problem, but a common misconception about drip tape is people seem, not everybody, but a lot of folks seem to think like if they don't see that thing like fully turgid and inflated, it's not irrigating. That's not necessarily true because that thing all works via conduction. So if that water is in contact with the surface of the soil, when it passes through, it's already going to start leaching out as it goes. The other thing, so it's kind of like the way you think about it is like, when you're on an airplane and they say, the oxygen mask will fall in the bag and it may not inflate, but oxygen is flowing. It's kind of the same thing with the drip tape. In fact, sometimes if you see that drip tape super turgid to the point where like you can barely pinch it, that usually means you've got a sensor that needs to get recalibrated. It shouldn't ever be like rock hard. Since we're on the drip tape subject, real quick, a nice little tip. If you guys are using drip tape a lot, multiple rounds, light, organics, biofilms happen. That's a shirt. Tad, can we get that on a shirt?
Right? Yeah.
But one of the best things that I've found to break it down safely that I know won't contaminate the next round once you reinstall the drip tape is using hydrogen peroxide. So if you can soak those in a tub of hydrogen peroxide, not a crazy dilution, nothing very concentrated. Basically, you just want that acid to start to chew away that up, maybe agitate a little bit, and then give it a good rinse afterward, because that way any byproducts you're dealing with are just hydrogen and oxygen, which are things we don't mind throwing into our beds at all. So if you do get some drip tape that does seem to not be irrigating the way it should, between rounds, give it a bit of a hydrogen peroxide rinse.
A couple of other pointers on that. Your main line, which I believe is it 10 millimeters? Is that right, Ben?
8. 8.
8 millimeters. Okay, your eight
Yeah.
millimeter line, it's either black or it's a flexible orange tubing.
Yeah.
You'll want to have something on the end of it so you can flush the line at the end of your wherever your line ends. And it's just good to make sure that you have good pressure there. And then you can also, after the sensor, before the drip tape gets where it would attach to the sensor, you can pull that off and check and make sure that you have
You're good there.
water coming water coming out
Through there.
I can move the chat if people think this is confusing people.
Yeah, there's been
Here.
a handful of comments.
I think I can remove it. There we go. So the reason I put the chat on was because I didn't think I was gonna be able to make it here being at the airport, and that way if they can't highlight comments, at least people could follow along. What I wanted to share about at Cultivate, so there are two things I learned here. So Cultivate, for those aren't familiar, is in Columbus, Ohio, the largest horticulture greenhouse show in the country. And it's really cool. It's not at all cannabis. But there were like Patrick Veazey, who I've had on the podcast. He was a speaker here. He's at NC State and he was presenting research on substrates. So he had some really interesting research on wood fiber substrates. And they've come a long ways in the last year. So we're looking for replacements for peat and replacements for aeration, like perlite, pumice, lava rock, vermiculite, those sorts of things. And basically what the research is finding, you can go 30-40% of these wood fiber substrates and get apparently the same level of growth as you would, essentially it could be a replacement for perlite in a lot of instances. So, it's complicated, depends on the.
Oh, it got real complicated.
Yeah, so there's a teaser, right? Tune in next time.
Oh,
no,
he's back.
No, he's not. He's not. Okay.
Yep. So guys, we'll be back to our regular format next week. So apologies for Oh, Tad.
All right,
Pat.
guys, I got a phone call. This is the problem with doing this stuff remotely. I apologize. Um, anyway, yeah, long story short, a lot of promising research there. There was also a company that had peat moss, but they had it in these larger pieces that could potentially offer some sort of aeration as well. Um, the things that would lighten the soil potentially could have bulk density issues down the road for us living soil guys, but might be an opportunity to move away from perlite and pumice. So
That's really
yeah, that was
cool.
exciting. And then also some more research on just all the benefits of silicon. Uh, they find in ornamentals, in cannabis, it doesn't even have to be a plant that's considered a high silicon uptake plants. You see increased yields, decreased pest problems, decreased pathogens. And honestly, I found his talk that even a little bit remedial compared to the stuff that Dr. Wendy Zellner shared on the podcast even. So if you want to be even, an expert on silicon, that podcast is probably my favorite. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things like there's very few things I'd say use in your garden. That's probably top of the list.
Yeah, I think every organic grower, I mean, not even every organic grower, salt growers too. They might need it more. But yeah,
Oh yeah.
everybody should be using silica. It's a dunk for me,
And
and
it
it does
doesn't
give you a
have to
little
be egg
trickle.
cell.
Yeah, whatever form that's soluble, available.
Wollastonite, calcium silicate, egg cell 16H, potassium silicates. You could use a monosilicic acid product. They're just going to be more expensive. And I haven't seen anything that really shows me there's a huge advantage to that, especially for us organic guys. So there's very easy ways to get silica into your plant. Even diatomaceous earth, there's some research, I think, from not Wendy Zellner, but Nicole Gauthier, pathologist. And she showed a 70% reduction in powdered mildew on cannabis by incorporating, I believe, diatomaceous earth into her media. So it's great.
That's awesome. I got to bet I can trial that in.
That'd be fun.
All right. So Little Nugs, having trouble keeping the top couple inches damp. Any tips? Organic grower using blue mat, strip tape, carrots, 1 foot square pattern. That's for you.
Yeah. Great question. So the way to think about drip tape too, and the way that kind of irrigates is it's kind of like a triangle or a pyramid, the drip tape, and then as water goes through, it kind of does this kind of a thing. So if you have a drip tape, I'm trying to use the screen here and here, you would imagine kind of maybe this space in the first couple of inches is dry. That's okay. Um, the nice thing about the 5-inch carrots is that they're sensing obviously 5 inches deep, which is where your rhizosphere typically is, depending on how deep you plant. If you plant deeper than that, I still think 5's okay. But if you're planting like in a big old pot, like 16 some inches deep, or 12, then a 9-inch sensor would be what you want to look for. The thing not to freak out about is, I mean, we've had beds in our facility that literally look like the desert. Like you get that cracking, that weird, and it's fine because if you dig again, the top couple inches are really kind of there, almost like a skin. They're protecting the lower ecosystem, and that's why even you go out to a desert, there's no water around. A couple inches down in that super cracked clay nonsense, there's moisture, there's life. So don't worry about it too much. Um, the way I think about it is your soil is like the engine and the plants are the dipstick. So if you see your plants starting to wilt or yellow or there's irrigation problems, that's when you should probably look and make sure everything's okay from the irrigation standpoint. I wouldn't worry about just some cracks or dryness happening in between drip tape or towards the first couple of inches. If you're dry 5-6 inches deep, then yeah, there's some irrigation that needs to get dialed up. But if you're talking the top inch, 2, or even 3, that much in between drip tape, then you should be fine.
I think that's the key point, Ben. So if I'm reaching down, let's say my fingers are an inch or 2 away from where that drip tape is lying, I would expect it
Mhm.
to be moist. As I go,
Right.
furthest away from the drip tape in the bed, I would expect it to be dry. But
Yeah.
if I dig down further there, I want to have moisture down below. And if I don't, I'm probably underwater. So
Right.
positioning is really important to think about. And then we want to make sure the drip tape is positioned in places that are getting the majority of the root zone. So
Right. And
those are the
so whenever you
key points there.
exactly, and the drip tape design, blue mat design that we worked on was built on that idea that whenever we send out a design, no matter where you put a plant in a bed or a pot, really, there should be irrigation happening from at least 2 sides. So whether it's on the corner or whether it's in the middle, the way we snake the drip tape ensures that water should be coming in from at least 2 sides. Obviously, if you've got um, a plant at the end and then a drip tape wraps around it, then that one's going to be well covered. But even in those dry zones, that drip tape should be running down the middle of a row, which means, yeah, every plant in that bed should be getting irrigation from at least 2, if not more sides, because that's exactly what we want to avoid. We want to make sure there's some overlap happening to make sure that, water's not being, left out of anyone's part of the bed.
And this is just off the top of my head, Ben, but as we're talking about this, I'm thinking if someone wanted to, let's say you have an existing design or we give you a design, you could always just add in another, if it's a small setup, you probably have adequate pressure. You could just throw in one more sensor and one more line and kind of fill in the gaps if you wanted a little
Deal
bit
with it.
better
Yeah.
coverage. So that's
Yeah.
an easy addition. There's no added, you don't have to start over
Yep.
or anything, I guess is my point.
And if you think about how transpiration and water moves, right? Your drip tape, like if you were to take a lot, like let's say you only had 3 feet of drip tape to use, and you took that 3 feet and you put it down the middle of the bed, that water is going to evaporate from the sides, right? That's why grassroots uses that moisture lock liner in those grassroot beds to try to like keep that stuff in. So if you're losing water really quickly, the best way to route your supply line or your drip tape rather is around the edge, because that way it keeps where that evapotranspiration is happening most damp, and then the center kind of stays insulated a little bit. So yeah, similar idea, Tad, where it's like if you can understand where the evapotranspiration is happening in your container, that's almost where you want to target the moisture drip tape to run over. So that way, you're fighting where that evapotranspiration is happening.
And I'll water more over the top if I feel like it needs it too, or around some dry spots. You don't be afraid to do that. It's whatever you think is best for your plants. But do regularly dig down into the soil with your hand and actually feel where the
Yeah.
moisture is at. That's the best advice I could give. Oh, did you see that last one, Ben? Sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit there.
Oh yeah.
Did you want to come on this before I move on to the next question?
Put a triangle feature on my plants are stacked in the middle, so that's good. Water from 3 sides of the boat. Great. Yeah, and again, Nugs, just play around. Take notes. Say this round I ran this. Take a photo. Next round, change it up a little bit, and it's not totally permanent, a blue mat layout. So after a couple of weeks, if you switch things up and things are not going the way you want, go back to the other way. But yeah, this is the fun part of experimenting and learning what's best for your given setup.
All right, Brandon, do you have any valuable tips for big pheno hunts, approximately 500 seeds? You've done that?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say I have any tips for it. I mean, the big thing is you would want to write down or you want to get as much data as possible. So, if you've got 500, number them 1 through 500, and then you want to keep data on, how quickly did this one germinate? Like what day did it germinate? You might want to track, first set of true leaves, You might want to track internodal spacing for, at least the first 3 nodes. Beyond that, you're really looking for morphology that works for you. You're really going by, terpene and appearance, but you're looking for a plant that meets your needs. Do you want something short and squat? Do you want something tall? Do you want something for indoor, for outdoor? So you're looking for that sort of morphology. And then other things you would look for beyond, obviously, that one that smacks. You're looking for the terpene profile that you're after. But after that, I would start looking for pathogen resistance and yield, being, kind of the last consideration. So the thing is to individually label all of them so you can keep them separated through the entire journey. And then you want to catalog all the different, data points that are interesting to you. So.
Yeah, make a list and a spreadsheet ahead of time.
Yeah.
And think about what you want to track. And so you're not tracking too many things, but you're tracking the important things.
Yeah. And then, once they get to a certain size, you're going to clone all of them so that you have genetic copies of them, so that when you harvest and that one that didn't really like blow your mind as far as the terpene profile, but hits like a haze and is super psychedelic and it's just like that magic cannabis, you didn't lose it because it didn't have the right terpene or the right look. So that way, taking clones enables you to run a plant through the entire process and, sample that final product. And then for the hash makers out there, you're going to want to take data on what washes the best, obviously.
You can flower pretty early too, clone and flower to get through that process faster. And you don't need large amounts of soil to do that. And this is a case where it might use like a fish hydrolysate or some other formulation that's not,
get it up and out quick. Yeah.
Yeah, not like a
The other
full
thing
living
too,
soil
right?
run.
You can do
small containers.
And if you've got the capital for it, there's those genetics tests, so you can know if you're dealing with males or females way before flower.
I just got mine maybe 20 minutes before we got on this. I just got mine.
Yep.
I'm doing big. It's not 500, but I'm doing several hundred right now. And yeah.
And then the one thing I wanted to add just to this topic real quick is I don't know if this applies to everybody or nobody, but there are a couple of other maybe antagonistic factors that you have to deal with if you're thinking about running this in a production facility. Not necessarily because our biggest constraint is, and it's really unfortunate because we've had to not put some really amazing stuff into production simply for the fact that it didn't fit our production schedule. That was the only reason. Like, it hit, it felt great, it smelled great, it looked great, it was a great yielder, all that stuff, but it just didn't fit within our facility's production window, so it had to go. So obviously home growers don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, but if there are somebody, if there are some folks in here from a commercial standpoint, unfortunately, the timing and layout and SOP and workflows of your facility and scheduling, that has a really big impact on what phenos will fit all of that too. But yeah, home growers, I'm jealous. You get to take anything to 12 weeks if you want to.
Yeah, there's certain things like GMO comes to mind that, don't really even wake up till week 10, that
right.
don't work.
And that's beyond our whole thing.
Yep.
And if you had to deal with blue mat flooding, I had it happen to me in my garage back in like 2016. Oh, dude, who am I kidding? 2006. It was a long time ago. God, well, when I first tried blue mats. Yeah. And I will blame myself for that. It was a sensor that I had bumped. And when you bump a sensor, it doesn't touch the soil. And then it thinks that it needs to keep watering, essentially. And so it won't, the reservoir. So when the reservoir ran out, it ran out. But it is a concern. I know people have had it happen to, but these last 2 runs, I've had it hooked up to a main line. I have not had a leak. I haven't really been concerned about it. If it
Yeah.
does leak, it's a slow leak. So yeah, well, I don't know. What do you say, Ben?
I only
So
see
there's
it
a
with
couple of
rolling
things.
beds.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Anytime you adjust the amount of slack or tension on a supply line, that could get dicey. I would say, depending on again how much time and how much energy and how much money you want to put into it, they do have flood sensors that you can buy, which is like almost like a little like electrode thing where if you put that in the bottom of your tent or whatever, that can kick off, a switch, or if you've got a pump kit, you can have it wired off so it kills the power to that outlet, and that way the pump kit will stop working and your blue mat's shut down, which obviously is a less gnarly catastrophe than flooding a garage or a bedroom or anything.
Yeah, I have those
There's things
from
to do.
Kagovi that
Yeah,
are attached to my Wi-Fi, so I'll get an alert
right,
to my phone if my water heater were
right.
leaking. So this would be
Yeah,
the same sort of thing you
same
could
idea.
use there, but not with a shut-off controller. That'd be a lot more expensive. So, and
That's
those
a
are like
bigger deal.
10 to 20 bucks. So
Yeah.
that's some more for away. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't be afraid of it for flooding. It could happen with any irrigation system. If you're checking on your plants, fairly regularly, it's a
Yeah.
fairly low concern depending on where your grow is.
And the last tip I have for reducing flooding or potential is you want to reduce the number of times you have to cut or insert a valve or any of those things, because every time you do that, that's 2 fail points that you could be potentially introducing into the line, right? So if you went straight from a reservoir right into a carrot, there's only 2 places where it hit the reservoir and where it hit the carrot where it could be an issue. But if you're doing all sorts of like, I got to split this to a humidifier, and then I want a disconnect valve over here, and then this over there, then every time you do that, that's another vector, if you will, for a potential, line to pop off or something like that. The other thing to remember, last part, is blue mats run off of very, very little pressure. So if you can manage to get an adjustable pressure reducer on the water line prior, upstream of your blue mat stuff, and just run it at 5 psi, the chances of that having enough of a force to pop any of those lines off is pretty low. But if you're running a full pressure at like, standard house pressures, then there's going to be a bit of force there that could make something want to go wild.
I'll tell on myself on the topic of floods. The worst flood I've ever had was just walking out of a room that had ebb and flow tables and a 400-gallon res, and I just threw the hose down as I was walking out and siphoned all 400 gallons onto the floor overnight. And so there's all kinds of ways to get floods.
I'm only throwing this comment up because I did make a post today that it reminded me. So thank you for the nice comment, but also there was a post today I put up from Bug Lady Suzanne showing some really cool tips and tricks for scouting using very affordable at-home tools or things you can literally get at the dollar store. So check out that video, and it can catch russet mites, which is a big deal because they are
Whoa.
super small. So
Whoa.
yeah,
Okay.
I'll give you a hint. I just talked to someone from Beneficial in second. I was talking about, I'm like, she uses an arrow brewer, like a coffee maker thing for part of it, and so it's kind of interesting.
All right. I'll have to sneak onto social media for that and sneak right back off though.
Someone is asking about genetics being weakened by re-vegging.
I don't.
Do you want to comment on that?
I can't
I can
speak
comment on it.
authoritatively. Yeah.
So
I don't see anything wrong with it.
With any plant, there is the opportunity for genetic mutations. In theory, plant stress can increase the rate of mutations, but realistically, it's not a concern just because of the rate mutations do occur. So you should end up still with the genetically identical plants. Now, probably more concerning is the pathogen load that can build up over time in that tissue. That to me would be more concerning than say genetic drift or genetic change itself. So that which can always be corrected through tissue culture in this case.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah,
Brandon.
I've got a buddy who has been cloning off of flowering plants with the same cultivar for 13 years, and it's still great, you know. So I think as long as you don't get some sort of bacterial or viral load, theoretically, you know, you should be okay. What's the carbon to nitrogen range we should be looking for in our beds, trying to decide if I can add too much compost? So 18 to 1 is kind of the acceptable, you know, high end. 16 to 1, if you can find it, it's even better. But yeah, so that's for your substrate though. And so, you know, if you had something that was 20 to 1, I'd use it because you're only adding a little bit, you know, to your bed. I don't like to add more than like 6 to 8% compost, and I only add compost every like 6 to 8 rounds. Just, you know, I don't want a mucky mix that doesn't drain well, you know. So I'm concerned about the carbon to nitrogen ratio. I'm concerned about the tilth of the soil. I usually do add some aeration when I add compost. Ben?
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 16 to 1, 18 to 1, kind of the upper limit. It looks like we lost Tad again, which is unfortunate because I think he set it up to where we can't see comments now.
I can see him on the side here.
Oh, okay,
I
yeah,
just
here we
don't know
go.
where
Okay.
he left off.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, so he's getting on a flight. Okay, cool. So Rusty Nails is referring to what Tad was talking about. Said it's like washing water hash with alcohol, then catching bugs instead of resin glands. Okay, cool. I get it. That's neat. No, too much chance of something going wrong. Seems harder to set the system up than grow a good plant. Yeah, I mean, it just totally depends. You know, some folks struggle with watering. Some folks have, you know, that's watering and curing, I think, are where art and science meet the hardest in cultivation. And then, you know, some folks, it's a perfect, you know, man, if I had, you know, I'd have seen more shows if I'd been able to set up a blue
That's
mat
it. Yeah.
system back in the day. And Tad's heading home from Cultivate. But yeah,
I got
yeah. So
again to from a facility standpoint, the real game changer for us with blue mats was, you know, we don't monocrop in a room. We've got 8, 10, 12 different cultivars going on in there. And you know, we would be like, oh, it's Tuesday, it's watering day. But you know, cultivar A could be very drought tolerant, and cultivar B could be very not. And we throw up, you know, whatever on a Tuesday. A plant doesn't know what a Tuesday is. So even though we're thinking we're staying really, you know, scientific and consistent and scheduled and all that stuff, there's there there's definitely a reason to go for blue mats, just from that standpoint, because it lets cultivar A dictate how much water it needs and cultivar B dictate how much water it needs all at the same time, and those can do this without us getting in the way.
yeah. Lots of great comments in here. Appreciate everybody, you know, the conversations between people as well. And everybody's always very civil on this live,
Yeah,
which
nice.
I very much appreciate. It's nice to be in a room full of adults and exchanging ideas and moving the conversation forward, looking out for each other. So I really dig it. Somebody said J5 .fo20. Good rule of thumb is if the seed pack says 8, run it to 10. And I totally agree with that. You know, I've got a lot of stuff that I'm sure you could cut it at 8 weeks and people would be super happy. But you know, I love, most folks here probably know who Soma is. And back in the day, there was an interview with him where he was like, calendars are for people, not for plants, you know, and just if you're sure it's ready, if you're 100% sure it's ready, give it one more week, you know. And I think that's a great idea. That just the morphological changes, the, you know, and yeah, you can go too far. So yeah, you don't want to start degrading THC, but up until that point, I think you can let it go.
Yep.
See what we got here.
Patrick Bennett, no questions. Explain equal. Oh, intermediate disturbance hypothesis. Yeah. Happy to do that if you guys want to get real nerdy.
Yeah, do you want to do that, Ben? You want to tackle that?
Sure. Yeah, let me see if yeah, so the way to think about this, guys, is this was all revolving around the idea that it's an ecological framework which works off the hypothesis that your most stable ecosystems, so we want to be thinking about our soil, are the most resilient and robust to problems, for lack of a bigger explanation, when there's the highest amount of species and biodiversity. That is true, and we've seen that supported in pretty much every ecosystem that we've studied, whether it's freshwater, saltwater, land, high, low, everywhere. The more species diversity there is packed into a system, the harder it is to move that system out of balance. So the reason that's such a big deal for living soil growers is because every cycle we come in and we say, you're done, pull the plants, pull the root balls, that whole ecosystem gets a really big shakeup, right? A really big disturbance. So how does that impact all this? So we can kind of think of ourselves as like a referee on a really mismatched sports game. So let's say you've got team A that is just beating the shit out of team B, and team A is some bacteria that's okay, but we want that biodiversity, right? And so over time, if team A is just going to keep deteriorating and deteriorating, team B, at some point, you're going to be left with mostly, if not all, of team A, right? So what the intermediate disturbance hypothesis kind of wrestles with is this idea that, well, because we come in and we shift things up all over the place, like I said, we pull stuff, we might flood the bed, we might flush the bed, we might amend the bed, all sorts of stuff to really shake up this system. That kind of reset, that works as a reset. And just based on numbers and math, if A is really high and B is really low, the amount of impact that those species will feel relatively would obviously impact A higher than B. So eventually you kind of come back down to here, right? And that keeps that system more stable and more biodiverse. So the way you could think about this, the way the guy who actually came up with this tested it in a really cool way. He went to the beach and he looked at really small rocks, medium rocks, and big boulders. And then he looked and he counted all the different species on small, medium, and big rocks. And then he put them in the intertidal zone, meaning the waves were going to move them around, right? And so after a while, he came back and recounted, knowing that the small pebble rocks were going to get moved with every wave, right? So the relative frequency of those disturbances was really high. And then the medium rocks, less so. They would get a big wave, maybe, would knock them, but the smaller waves, not so much. And then the boulders, nothing moved them. Big wave, small wave, they just sat there. And what he found was it was the medium-sized rock that had the most amount of species, because that disturbance wasn't so frequent like it was on the small rock that nothing could settle, nothing can get established. The big rock, what ended up happening was because nothing disturbed it, you ended up these climax ecosystems. So you could think of like a rainforest, right? Where you've got really only a handful of species of trees that set up that canopy, and then everything else is just kind of shit out of luck for light nutrients because they're set up. But in that same rainforest, if you had a lightning or a storm or something and you clear out a giant section of that forest, what happens? You get all these pioneering species start to pop up because the sun's hitting the ground for the first time in a while. And the overall diversity and biodiversity of that system actually goes up because all of a sudden now you're giving space to all these species. So what does this all mean for us living soil growers? It means that if you can manage to hold on to your soil, if you can hold on to your ecosystem, you can really create a very stable, robust, and ecologically diverse system that your plants will absolutely love. And in fact, will have access to terpenes and secondary metabolites that you couldn't even guess if you bought KiS soil today, right? It's a function of time and change over time and how much we're disturbing that system to try to balance and create that diversity. I know that was a lot. So I'm going to stop, but I nerd out, like I said, because that's kind of my bread and butter. And it's super interesting and super cool.
No,
So
I love that.
there you go.
We know that soil that's been disturbed has greater population and diversity. And Fried
Yeah.
Piper says, think of giant herds of bison on the prairie. And I just saw a really interesting thing about reintroduction of bison to northern Mexico so that they could reestablish the prairie. And what happens is the bison come back, and because bison move around as opposed to cattle are kind of docile and lazy, for lack of a better word. They're just not motivated to move around. And so they do a lot of compaction. Buffalo, on the other hand, do relatively less compaction. And then there's something about the buffalo that sets the prairie up for the reintroduction of prairie dogs who aerate the soil and bring in all kinds of other species, and it just, it gets better fast and faster. So it's really neat. And so thanks for putting that in there. Type 1 grower, does this apply to soil that has been reclaimed in totes repeatedly as well, where the entire soil mass is disturbed? Yes. And so one thing to keep in mind is, when you say reclaimed in totes, think about cartel bison. Does this one thing to keep in mind, the disturbance, there's always been the person that got this into my head finally after all these years, is there's always multiple levers that are going to get pulled. There's cofactors, covariables, however you want to put it. And so, yes, we want to disturb that soil, but if it's sitting in a warm garage or something where it dries out, a lot of that biology, it's not going to necessarily die off. It's just going to go to sleep, form a cyst, some kind of overwinter or whatever, different form, and it'll come back once it gets wet, But yeah, so, soil that's been disturbed will have better diversity.
And the thing that's really amazing about that, and this goes directly into why, why humans really should worry about biodiversity too, is because once you have those niche spaces, or you can think of them as little jobs, right? You got bacteria that do this thing, and within the bacteria, they got one job does this and one job does that. You got protists, you've got nematodes, you've got all these different things happening around. Because those niche spaces, like those pieces of if you took like a frame and said, here's my ecological landscape, if you walk into a hydro or a very sterile environment, that frame is empty, right? Which means any little thing that wants to get in there literally has the entire frame to work in and just proliferate and explode. But because we work in living soil systems and all of those niche spaces are already filled by the things in our soil, bugs and goodies and stuff like that, that puzzle is more or less filled up. So anything that does land on there is either A, hopefully, going to be eaten by something that's already in the system, or B, have to work its ass off to compete with something that's already there, right? So if you have this puzzle piece already in the system, and then you've got a pest that fits that same niche space or that same puzzle piece, this is going to happen before this can establish, right? And then even again, like we said, if we've got nematodes and earthworms higher up in the trophic system that are going to put downward pressure already, then yeah, that's why our systems are so much more robust to these wildfires that we've heard rage in these monocrop sterile environments, because there's nothing there to compete against.
Yeah.
So another fun way to think about it.
Yeah, and I think the reason that we bring it up is that there are a lot of messages that you don't want, no till is zero till, and so really the message, I feel like, in my opinion, should not be no till, it should be no compaction, and so that's the big takeaway, I think. So there's a lot of great grinder talk. You could definitely put it in some alcohol, and it won't hurt any kind of grinders. See,
I use an old walnut grinder, like a vintage one.
oh, really?
Yeah, hold on. I'll pause myself. I'll go grab it.
All right, nice. Trying to build a mycelial network for a plant that does not need fungal dominant soil. It's just pissing in the wind. Yeah, we don't, trying to build mycelial network is difficult in and of itself. There's some people who really enjoy, in the same way that there's people that enjoy growing a cover crop. It does something for them, and so if they want to do it, and they can afford it, then yeah. But cannabis likes bacteria, and once we put our teas, or whatever our special sauces are, our inputs, once we put that into the soil, we're adding to diversity. But depending on, again, all these covariants, the temperature, the moisture levels, all these different things, we're going to lose certain populations, gain certain populations. And so once it goes in there, we don't have a whole lot of control over it. We would like to think we do, but we really, the soil is going to go back to whatever stasis those environmental settings support.
Yeah. And the way I think about it is like, a lot of people like to use the comparison between weed and alcohol, or whatever, but I think it's a lot more like wine, especially, again, coming from a facility thing. Like, we'll produce the same cultivar round after round, like our Rick James or whatever, right? Every round. And guess what? It's not going to be the same every round. Some rounds are going to be killer. Some rounds are going to be hopefully good, and hopefully we never end up with a bad one. But that's just the nature, and that's the kind of, the same winery can produce the same wine for hundreds of years. But 2018 was amazing, but the 2019 was shit, right? So it's the same grape, it's the same vine. That's just organic growing. I knew a guy who made it his life's work to try to create the same exact terpene profile using organic living soil methods. I said, it's just never going to happen. And I think he went out of business.
I think on the terroir point, there are going to be differences from, and it might be subtle, and it might be, a significant part of the population that doesn't really even care or notice. But I think the folks that are here care and notice.
Yeah.
And so, what you have in your soil, your biology does speak to your finished product, to those nuanced terpenes.
So, Brandon, here you go.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So just an old walnut grinder.
Wow. Nice.
It works. And if you need to grind a lot, this has got the reservoir for that. Your wrist doesn't hurt afterwards.
My dad had a really cool, it was orange, and it looked like a upside down volcano, and it was a seed separator, and it was kind of
cool.
Like a salad spinner, and it would spin the seeds out of it. Had some pretty neat stuff. Okay, so cannabis cow. I grow organic and I transplant up solo 1.5 every time I transplant a healthy plant. They fail, or they fall behind after transplant because of lack of nutrients. How can I get what they need? So from a solo to a 1 gallon to a 5 gallon. So organics is really difficult in small volume containers. And so For solo cups, I think feeding with fish hydrolysate is just by far the easiest way. It's in solution. It's immediately available. It's going to work similar to an ionic solution. And then, even a 1 gallon is kind of tricky. And so just fish hydrolysate would be my recommendation.
And I can speak to a little bit of the math/science behind why growing in small things is really difficult. And that's basically just math, right? So surface area goes to the power of 2, like square feet. But then when you add cubic yards, that scales to the power of 3. So for every unit you move up or down, your volume is going to change to the power of 3, but your surface area is going to only change to the power of 2, which means in small containers, you don't have a whole lot of volume, but you got a lot of surface area. So that means there's going to be a lot of potential for convection, conduction, evapotranspiration, all of those things to happen. But as you scale up, because volume increases by the cube, not the square, that essentially is why we like beds so much, is because there's so much buffering capacity because your volume is increasing. If, let's say you added an inch, for argument's sake. If you add an inch to your container size, the surface area goes up squared, but the volume goes up cubed. So even though you made one adjustment, you're increasing your volume faster than you're increasing your surface area. So that's why if you go the other way, there's so much risk of water problems, and because there's water problems and the plants are going to have to run hard. If the plants run hard, the nutrients get tricky. That big container is really a big deal for keeping that environment, again, super stable. And that's basically why is the cube versus the square versus the cube. And it's called allometric scaling, if you guys really want to get crazy. But that's the idea behind it.
Yeah, and that speaks to the water, the irrigation aspects of it, and then just it's hard to have the volume of fertility and the volume of microbes needed to cycle that quickly in a really small container. Is a lot easier in a bigger space. Yeah. So So Tad just said that you also have less nutrients in a small pot and leach some when you water versus a better or larger pot. Still advantages to appropriate size plant and appropriate size pot. 100%. Hi guys, what do I do if my sticky traps are filling up with springtails? Are they good or bad? Springtails are not really a problem unless they get into insanely high volumes. They could potentially start to chew on roots, but what springtails tell me is that you might be a little too wet. And so make sure that you're happy with your irrigation management. Make sure you don't have standing water anywhere or anything like that. Let's see. Rusty Nails. I veg for 4 weeks and flip. They go from solos to 1 gallons about week 3. They survive 3 weeks in 1 gallon until girls are identified. Spread out up pots. Don't veg too long. All great points. Take about a week and they start to go again. Yeah, there's always like a 7 to 14 day lag with organic inputs, depending on the input. Obviously, like phosphorus sources and that kind of stuff are going to take way longer. But with most of the stuff that we're adding in, there could be up to a 7 to 10 day delay. Whereas with a fish hydrolysate with a liquid, it's just there available. So that's the advantage. It's a liquid Band-Aid for small volume. Makes it really easy. All right. Tad's getting on the plane, so we're ending the show. Everybody, thank you so much.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, guys,
here.
as always.
Yeah. Tad, safe travels, and we'll be back to our regular format next week, next Tuesday. Thank you guys so much for spending some time with us, and take care.